What's going on, everybody? Gunnar here, and welcome to the final episode of Die Like a Pro. I tried to film an episode before this, and it was going to be me talking about like fly size and color and kind of like pattern selection for different water conditions, and it turned out to be me rambling for about 25 minutes, and it didn't seem that exciting. So I'm going to skip that. I'm going to hang on to a lot of that info and hopefully share it later in a different series, and hopefully that comes to fruition in 2018. So stay tuned for that, but I'm going to skip that stuff for now because I kind of like how Die Like a Pro is wrapping up. So this is all about resources, stuff that inspired me, where I learned basically everything, and I just want to share them with you and hopefully kind of go about a way to use these resources, because you know I'm only 26 years old and I have 4 different books written by people who have, like, I mean, they each have 30 years of experience or more, right? This is 120 years of experience right here, like right here on top of my table. And there's even more than that. So it's like, you know, these resources are super useful. So first and foremost, before I was a fly fisherman, I was a gear fisherman. And the book that really opened my eyes to really just variation and retrieves and stylistic baits, and it's musky specific, but I applied it to all my predator fishing, and it's A Complete Guide to Musky Hunting with Jim Saric. This book was like revelational for me, and this was kind of like in my earlier 20s, like I was 20 years old. This book was like the bee's knees. If you like to fly fish for musky, I would check out a lot of the gear resources. They're absolutely phenomenal, and they'll point you in the right direction. Now, I got into trout, and I think the probably the best resource for just about anybody in terms of streamer fishing is Kelly Gallup's Modern Streamers for Trophy Trout. I've probably read this book like half a dozen times. Like I like can regurgitate it in my sleep. Like, and this book, I even have the DVD for it. He has a DVD. I don't know if they come as a pair or if I got them separate. It was a gift from a buddy. But I've watched that like a dozen times. Now, when you look at a resource like this, right, this book, Kelly's got like 35, 40 years experience, probably even more than that, right? This book, the first time you read this, I guarantee you 90% of this book's going to go over your head. Not that it's like you can't understand it or it's like out there. It's just way too much information. And every single page has like literally a nugget of gold on it. And so what I do is, like I said, I've read this book probably a half a dozen times or more. It's one of those things like, say Kelly makes 30 points. My guess is if you read the book straight through, you'll remember maybe 10 of them. Say you remember a third. By the next week when you go fishing, maybe you're down to maybe 5 points. And then with the distraction of mosquitoes and reading water and trying to mend your line or whatever the heck you're doing, you maybe apply 3 of them, right? You got 10% of the book the first time you went out. And when you really, in order to understand something, you need to have perspective on that topic. Like, if you just go into something blind, it overwhelms you. But the more experience you get, the more of those little nuggets you pick up. So what I like to do is I basically read this book like once a year. Like before I start every season, and I like to change it up because you'll pick out different things. Like maybe there's a section that you wanted to apply to high water, and it's like, well, you go out, you read this book in the middle of the summer, and by the time you get some fall rain or something, you kind of forgot about it. So like change it up, like read it, you know, your first year, read it before the season, the second year, read it in the middle of the season, your third year, read it by the end of the season, and you will see, like, you remember those first 3 points. The next time you read this book, you'll be like, holy crap, I forgot about all this stuff that I read and wanted to try and didn't, because you forgot, and it was overwhelming, and it was too much information to apply at one time. So you take a resource like this and you come back to it, and it'll just build upon itself. And then you do that 5 or 6 times, and you'll have this book not like memorized for the sake of like, oh, you know, like it's you do that to apply it to yourself, and then whatever holds true, like you adapt the book to yourself. Like you take Kelly's ideas and then you morph them into your ideas based on your water and your flies and how you like to fish. It's not like you just copy Kelly. That's not the point. The point is to learn from Kelly and then apply that to your situation, because every river is different and everybody's fish is different, and everybody's different. So take what you can, but that's what I'd seriously recommend. Well, on top of that, before I move on, Kelly has an advanced streamer fishing book, or a DVD. You pair both of these, and it's like a 5-hour learning experience that you will not regret. So that's advanced streamer fishing, but I like both of those. So all of those resources right there are all fishing related, right? And I want to add, so you got modern, you got a complete guide to musky hunting, and don't just disregard that. If you're a trout guy or a smallmouth guy, if you fish for predators, that book will help you. Like, it's crazy cool, especially if you're maybe like I was young when I read it, so I was just new at everything, and it just helped me a ton. But before we move on to like fly tying specific resources, George Daniels' strip set is like the perfect counterpart to Kelly's modern streamers, trophy trout, modern streamers for trophy trout. It's like Kelly's, he's preaching this predator prey, reactionary, slap your fly, jerk strip retrieve type stuff, and it's all territorial, fast paced, fight or flight style thinking. And George, he totally acknowledges that, and that has a place in this book. And he kind of summarizes a lot of that, but this is also very food specific, a lot of different techniques, ways to swing flies and dead drift flies and give or take flies, and totally, focuses on floating lines and intermediate lines and sink temp lines and full sink lines. So where Kelly is very specialized in his streamer approach, this is a very wide-ranging, all-encompassing book on streamer fishing, and it's excellent. It's really cool, and it opened my eyes a lot because I dove into Kelly super hard, and that this kind of helped just kind of open the horizon of what is possible as far as streamer fishing goes. And this will help you if you face deep water conditions or high water conditions, or if you fish different watersheds for different species. And this is a really good wide-ranging resource that will help you for just about everything. So those are my 3 main kind of fishing ideal books that really kind of pushed me into understanding predator-prey relationships and really getting reactionary bites and all that stuff. But now moving into like fly specific, the best book that basically changed my life was Fly Design by Bob Popovics. I had a couple people who requested me to do some bucktail stuff for Tie Like a Pro. This is all the bucktail stuff I know. Like, this is everything. He goes over pages upon pages upon pages of bucktail technique, and it's unbelievable what you can do with a single material like bucktail. But this book, he's talking about silhouettes, and he's talking about realism, he's talking about 3-dimensional bulk, he's talking about how your fly appears from the bottom and the side and the top. It's all about taper, it's all about taper materials, taper flies, it's all about building shoulders and proper hydraulics, and how those, the shoulder and the push and the collapse and getting a tail to move, and like, this is where that comes from, and at least for me. And I loved this book, and it's got a ton of tying patterns, like probably 30 patterns in the back, with naturals and synthetics, matching, bait fish and everything. If you wanted to start tying musky flies and pike flies, big predator flies, or if you were a saltwater fisherman, this is where I'd start, because this is all about bait fish and silhouette and movement and working with naturals and synthetics, and this is gold. On top of that, I would have to add Kelly Galloup Streamers on Steroids. This DVD was kind of my first trout. This was my first tying DVD ever. And like, I never knew how to finish a fly. I never knew how to tie a head. Like, I would just keep adding tailing materials and tailing materials and tailing materials, and I didn't know how to bring it all together. And this DVD is kind of what just blew my mind as far as proportions and silhouette and how to space stuff and tapers and profiles and all the different heads, wool heads, deer hair heads, and bait fish heads, and like, between bait fish and boogeymen and tips up, and I mean, this is like, if you wanted to start tying trout streamers and smallmouth streamers, this DVD would have your bases covered as far as designs. And Kelly, like, each tutorial is like an hour long. Like, Kelly goes super in depth, and this is absolutely excellent. And then on top of that, because that's a lot of just to add to that, I think if anybody wants to get into deer hair, I didn't really go over it a ton. We did some stacking, we did some spinning, but if you want to like master deer hair so that you can do whatever you want with it, whenever you want with it, The best thing for me was I got Pat Cohen's, I called this a DVD series. They're not related, but he has 3 different DVDs. And probably the first one you should get if you get them is How to Stack a Bass Bug. The Stack Deer Hair Diver is the name of it. And this has all of your techniques, you know, stack on top of a stack on top of stack, building your thread base and packing it and building a back bump and a front bump and squeeging everything. Is like, this is everything you need to know. And then these next 2 DVDs basically highlight those techniques and the different applications and the different patterns, and it just helps kind of open your mind to the application for that deer hair process. So if you get one, I'd recommend getting at least one other one, because they're definitely helpful. And like I said, like, I've watched these probably once a year. Like, I literally just put them in and listen to them while I tie, and every year I learn something new, I hear something new, I pick up on a different topic that I missed because it was overwhelming the first time, right? So these are exceptional. And then lastly, I want to talk about a book that it takes the fishing approach and it takes the tying approach and it blends them, and I really like that style of book. And it's Rich Strolis' Catching Shadows. And basically, I know my, Tie Like a Pro is very streamer specific, and Rich has a lot of dry flies and nymphs in here, but he has a whole section dedicated to streamers, and the whole front half of that is kind of like every single pattern, and this is what I really liked, every single pattern has, why it's designed, how it was designed, what circumstances it was designed around, why he used certain materials. So like you have your hog snare, and then it goes into basically how it came about, why it came about, how to fish it, why to fish it that way, all the variations you can tie, and then it's a photo step by step. And he has some really cool techniques that are just well-rounded. They'll make you a well-rounded tyer if you go through the book and you take the time to tie the patterns. And I really like that approach of basically telling the story behind the fly and why it is the way it is, and then showing people how to tie it. So that's another excellent resource that I add to the pile. So those are like the main things that have really opened my mind as far as how to get like just how to be a better tyer. And again, all of them I've come back to, and I've probably read multiple times. I look through them every year. I watch the DVDs over and over every year. It's like, because when you need to come back to that information, right? You need to come back to it after you have built up a perspective so that you can gain more. Because if you try to shove it all in at once, it'll just go in and out and you won't remember any of it. You got to take it at chunks. But I wouldn't recommend doing the book in chunks. I'd recommend doing the whole book and then coming back to the whole book. And you basically, you reaffirm what you did apply, and that becomes like solidified, and you start to agree and form your own opinions on some of those ideas, and then you start adapting more on top of that, and you'll become super well-rounded. And this doesn't take a long time to do. You could, if you did all these resources in a year and did them back to back in 3 years, you'd be like seriously top notch. It's like, this is like 200 years worth of information and experience right here, right? So that's what I think about that. So yeah, that's Tie Like a Pro. These are the resources that I just kind of like love and cherish and like inspired me. And there's plenty of other tyers out there who have totally changed my viewpoint on this, but this is a lot of the stuff that I'd like to see supported. It's really good stuff. So thanks for watching Tie Like a Pro. If any of you like this, feel free to subscribe, follow, like, whatever, because a lot of this is going to be coming back in tutorials. I got death grips and mini death grips, and I finished the Dragon Spell finally, and the Fuzz Senior, and everything's coming together, and those are wicked cool designs that I'd like to share with you guys. So follow along for that. And yeah, if you like this, the best thing you could do for me is just tell somebody, share it with somebody, word of mouth, give them a link. All these videos are in one single playlist, and just pass it along to someone who's either starting tying or just getting into streamer fishing or whatever you think. So I appreciate it. And if you got any questions, if I didn't cover anything, let me know, and hopefully I can either add more to this series, like whatever. If something comes up, I can just add it to the series for you guys, or I'll just bring it up in a more recent video or post or something like that. So thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. Have a good one.